Very good. Thank you so much, Susan. When we advertised this session, put together the 25 words or less of what we're going to be talking about. This was probably 6 months ago. So at that time, I just kind of threw together a shopping list of stuff that we could be talking about: AI, anything as a service, governance, accountability, virtualization, sustainable energy, cybersecurity, hyperautomation, operating everywhere, predictive analytics, software quality standards, smart cities, deep fakes, autonomous vehicles, and even NFTs. And those were kind of a laundry list. Well, we're going to be actually be talking about most of these. The word cloud that I put in place is a word cloud based on all of these words, and then really looking at the areas that are today being much more emphasized. Things like smart city, cybersecurity, deep fakes. Those were very, predictive analytics. Those were areas that we really are going to be focusing on and talked about. I'm going to slim this list down a little bit and get to 10 so that if I don't, we'd be here all day. Don't want to do that. So back on the 12th of May, almost a year ago, I gave a talk on right here on technology hype cycle and who were going to be 2021's winners and losers. And that time, pretty much predicted that the winners were going to be data analytics, machine learning, not just AI, but actually machine learning, the Internet of Things, and the cloud. And I think that there's probably no one in the audience today, no one's participating today who isn't impacted by one or more of these. And these have become some real winners. I think the losers still end up being non-fungible tokens, NFTs, cryptocurrency, and the Internet of Behaviors. And I joked about the Internet of Behaviors when I gave the talk, talking about how the last thing I really want is for my laptop or my computer or anywhere I am to mimic how I behave. That wouldn't last long as a laptop, I'm afraid. So I think the idea of the Internet of Behaviors was probably interesting for a number of PhD theses, but really hasn't caught on. Cryptocurrency is still pretty much in limbo. And it's in limbo because right now the concerns that we have with cryptocurrency are going to be regulatory concerns, and there are some issues to where this had been thought of as being the anonymous way for those of us to keep government out of our lives, if we wanted to keep government out of our lives. Unfortunately, it appears that a number of the cryptocurrencies have been not so much hacked, but have been monitored, and a lot of the transactions, although they are secure in a blockchain, they're not as anonymous as we'd like them to be. So I think these are the major losers from that talk. We'll talk today some more about the winners. So today in this presentation, I want to focus on really three major topics: what you should already be doing, what you can ignore, and then the top 10 technologies to watch. So I think that what you should be doing today, and you may want to check to see if you are doing it, is you should be doing data analytics. You should be taking advantage of the cloud, however you can, in whatever manner you're using it, whether you're using software as a service, whether you're using analytics as a service, whether you're using data as a service, anything with as a service on the end is pretty much something that is going to be up in the cloud. I think you should be very much focused on cybersecurity. With what's been going on in the Ukraine and Russia, I think it's I think we need to make sure that all our cybersecurity in our companies and personally are well understood and we have it under control. Cybersecurity is really important from that point of view, and we experience it early on when we've actually still have an office on Sakhalin Island in Russia, and although we haven't had anybody there for for 2 years now because of COVID and because of the quarantine, prior to that, we were doing all work for Exxon, which has 5 sites on Sakhalin Island, where they really started out as research rigs and now are production rigs. But we did the cybersecurity for those 5 assets and realized early on that all those Russian assets were being attacked regularly, by Ukraine's, by the U.S., by anybody else who decided they could do some hacking and wanted to try some hacking. So we learned very early on that that was very important. I think what you can safely ignore, and I really believe this, I think you can safely ignore blockchains, NFTs, cryptocurrency, and the Internet of Behaviors. I think those are the ones you can actually ignore. So today you should be doing analytics, the cloud, cybersecurity, the Internet of Things. You can ignore those other 4, but I think the top 10 technologies to watch are the next ones that we'll talk about. So within those 10 top technologies, and again, next year, if I give a talk like this again, which I would hope to do, I think that we'll look through those and see which ones of these I was right about and which ones that I was wrong about. I think the top technologies you want to watch, smart spaces, and smart spaces basically, thank you, COVID, for providing, for us having to go into smart spaces, having to make where we work or from at home, those much smarter. Generative AI. You now understand machine learning. I'm sure everybody here understands machine learning perfectly, has no issue with that. But the key is now going to be the idea of generative AI, and we'll talk some more about that. The idea of a data fabric, and the idea of data fabric is important because that's one of the areas that we can use to help tie together all the big data we have, all the other kinds of data that we have, and also the data fabric is there to help tie together the silos. That although during the age of databases, 90s, early 2000s, when we were out putting together data, getting all our data warehouses together and all these other things, I think over that period of time, once we've taken the focus off of it, our data is now reverted back to silos. And the idea of data fabrics to help with that. Graph technologies, we'll talk a little bit more about those since you're doing data analytics. So I know all of you are. And if you want to implement something like a data fabric, you're going to have to understand graph technologies. Now, graph technologies, very much like AI, are very math intensive. Before I was doing my graduate work in the early 1970s, I remember doing work in Fortran, of course, and we were doing some large data analytics of fairly large data sets, and we actually looked at graph technologies at that point. Graph technologies are mathematical constructs. They're easy to use if you've got the tools to use them, but it took much higher end computers to be able to start doing those. And I remember some of the inklings of doing some of this early on Craze in the 1980s. Distributed enterprise. Again, thanks COVID. Thanks for the quarantine. You know, we've by force had to distribute our enterprise. More people working from home, more remote sites, just the ability to put people in places where they felt safe in order to work. So that's where we are. Metaverse. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the metaverse and show you where you can get to some more information on that. My stance there is watch it but stand back. Don't get too close. Don't get your fingers caught. It may be really painful. Privacy enhancing computation. Talk some more about that. That's the idea of the GDPR. We want to thank Facebook for that. If you want another reason to thank Mark Zuckerberg and the folks at Facebook, I'll give you another reason when we talk about this. Decision intelligence. Again, the idea of going back to generative AI. Decision intelligence is looking at our wealth of decisions we have to make, looking at the landscape of our own environments, and then really automating those decisions. It's really the idea of automating Boston squares. Then hyperautomation. All I can say is when we talk about that, this is this year's buzzword bingo. This is the one that you're going to get all the buzzwords you can imagine coming out of hyperautomation. And finally, quantum computing. I'll talk a little bit about quantum computing, but then I'll also talk about a webinar that I'm going to do here again on the 27th of April and dive into quantum computing in much more depth. So let's dive into each one of these technologies, take a quick look. Smart spaces. Again, when they talk about smart spaces, we can thank COVID for it. We've got smart homes, smart buildings, smart factory, smart cities. The smart home and all these smart spaces, the key to these is understanding the Internet of Things and having a way to collect the data. We've got we can connect lots of household devices. We can control lighting, a lot of those things. There's a new term called domotics, which refers to the whole idea of how we automate our domains. I'm sure that whoever invented domotics got a passing grade on their PhD thesis, so that was good. Smart buildings. We're going to be interconnecting all our smart spaces within those buildings and have an automated building. Now, most of the things that are here in smart spaces they're all available today. For smart houses and smart buildings, all of these things are being done today. You could have automated your home years ago. In fact, here in Austin, I think probably in the late 1990s, we started wiring new houses. New home builds and apartments were all being wired for smart spaces. So again, this is nothing new. This idea of smart factories, when we look at manufacturing industries, these were pretty much the idea, where the ideas of a lot of the smart technology came to be, especially in semiconductors. We put together a lot of very smart factories when we were doing semiconductor work. We basically had to, because of the high level of automation that was required, because of the small geometries that we were working with, so they had to be smart. Now these are moving forward into other areas. One of the big issues, and we saw the vulnerability of this, the smart factory shifts towards a digital supply network. So the smart factory assumes everything is just in time. As you can see, what's happened today with the delays in shipping, with the lack of some of the supplies to do some of the raw manufacturing that's needed, we have enormous supply chain issues. And we've helped create those supply chain issues because we did work in just-in-time factories. So there wasn't an extra box of semiconductors that would control the GPS in your car, in your Toyota Corolla, sitting in the back room anymore of the factory. They were waiting. They were in a shipment somewhere. But now, once those shipments were delayed, which we've all been subject to, that the smart idea, having smart factories, really breaks down. So that's one of the things that is a downside to these. Smart cities. We've been doing more and more with smart cities, starting out with basically putting wireless in place. You have to have a fairly strong Wi-Fi network. If you look at some cities like London, and if you've ever been to London, you will be photographed more than you can imagine. London even has more cameras in it than Shanghai, and Shanghai and Beijing pretty much are world leaders in monitoring their own folks, while London is even better, and that is part of that smart city network. The idea of being able to control stoplights for emergency vehicles, being able to automatically route traffic, change lanes, do different things. Smart cities are going to have to get a lot smarter if Elon Musk's idea of the self-driving Tesla is ever going to become a reality, because we're going to need an enormous number of sensors and lots of sensor suites, not only in the vehicle itself, but on the streets, in the air. We're going to just, this is going to be absolutely necessary. So smart cities are going to be necessary for us to really take advantage of, an electric vehicle or an autonomous vehicle future. So that's the smart spaces. Really gotten pushed forward by COVID. It's become a conglomeration of things now. Anything that was smart, where people could be, we've put those into smart spaces, and a lot of that is thanks to COVID. But do I think it's going to do I think it's going to be a major driver for the next year? And the answer to that's no. I give a thumbs down to smart spaces because I think it's just an accumulation. It's just a big bag of tricks. And I don't think we'll be seeing smart spaces as an overall idea in the next 12 months. Generative AI. You now understand machine learning. So generative AI is what we talked about. In fact, I remember drawing diagrams of this when we were doing information theory as an undergraduate. I got data. Data becomes information. Information becomes knowledge. Well, data becomes information after we've really looked at it, manipulated it, done some processing to it. The raw data needs processing. So I've got rules and everything. So I have to process that to become information. Many times I don't know the rules. I have to bring out the rules. So it becomes an intellectual exercise. Information is good for, I'm solving this one problem, but it becomes knowledge when I can apply it other places, when I can use it standalone or combine with other information to make more knowledge. So what generative AI says it's going to do is it's going to do this automatically. The idea is that I'm going to use machine learning methods, and again, AI is a big umbrella, covers a lot of things. Generative AI is really not AI; it's really machine learning. And so I'm going to use machine learning to automatically do some of these things. I'll have those learning methods. What I want to be able to do is I want to generate some brand new, completely original, realistic knowledge. And that's many times that's very difficult to do when you look at the work scientists perform, when you look at the work that designers and engineers perform. We use a large amount of data. We use information from other places. And when we create knowledge, most of the time we have a good understanding of what we think that knowledge is. The idea of, how do you create that information? Well, during the introduction, when having my bio, that one of the sets of patents we did was using Chebyshev polynomials, and polynomials have derivatives, and Chebyshevs are eighth and ninth derivative polynomials. And what you use them for is to really smooth out data and show trends. And we used it to do high volume, high movement pricing data of retail goods. So you've got lots of data coming in really quickly, and you need to reprice it. I've got a demand. I've got so many in stock. Here's what I sold it for last. Can I increase the price? Or it's sitting on my shelf. Can I decrease the price? What can I do to make that happen? That's part of one of the types of things that gets done in generative AI. But you still have to understand what you're doing. It's not a magic, it's not magic where I dump in all the data known to humankind and out comes this sparkling knowledge. It still takes people like you and me to come up with an idea and then use that knowledge to prove the idea. I could use it to create some software code, facilitating drug development, enormous amounts of data in drug development. And again, targeted marketing, the idea of having those flexibilities. A lot of the misuses that we're going to see, it's going to be a great way to process more data out of Facebook so I can generate more scams, or buy more data, more stolen data that's on the dark web from a lot of these hacks that have occurred, and then use that data to target people, in more, in a much quicker fashion. Fraud, of course, waste, fraud, abuse, political disinformation, what we saw on Facebook during some of the last previous elections, and which in reality is still going on. So, being able to put disinformation out, and then forged identities, being able to put together some very realistic identities through this. So generative AI, it's out there right now. The question is, are we going to see it the end of the year? Is it going to last into 2023? And my prediction is yes. Generative AI is going to be there with us. And it's important to understand that, we're going to be seeing that in the very near future, in this year. Data fabric, and I have the forward reference to graph technologies on this one. So what data fabrics are attempting to solve is, all the information silos that are within a data system that are incompatible, integrated with other data systems. Data and application silos really have surged in the last decade. Now, as I just mentioned, we spent an enormous amount of time in the 80s, 90s, and aughts to get rid of these data silos. And in many cases, a lot of the data silos, especially in accounting departments, in finance departments, or in customer service departments, where you knew that old George, who'd been working in the customer service department for the last 5 years, had this best Excel spreadsheet, and what you wanted to do is you wanted to get a copy of George's spreadsheet because it was much better than the corporate data, and the corporate data had no use for you. So you went and found the spreadsheet, and that was one of the things that was an outgrowth of bringing personal computers into the workplace and the invention of spreadsheets in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. So then we had distributed computers and less expensive computers, mini computers, and today we've got the cloud. So you don't have to raise your hands, but I'm sure a lot of you have got some data sitting in the cloud that you use all the time. You may share with a few other people. I know I've got stuff in Dropbox that I share with a selected group of people, and we use this data. Of course, it would be better if it was somewhere else in the corporate structure. So this problem keeps reoccurring. We can't stop it out. I don't know if data fabric's going to stop it out at all, because you're not going to stop it with a tool. It's the way we act as humans. Many times we're just trying to be helpful. Other times we want to guard the knowledge we know because that's how we feel we derive our power. So the data fabric's going to stop that, hopefully. So they really become an integration of data across platforms, across business users. It's there to simplify the data structure of the organization, but in reality, it will probably complicate it even more. It should create a scalable architecture that reduces technical debt, but these are all allegations. This hasn't been proved yet, and I don't know of anything where, when I have opened up and gotten a clear picture of what's going on within my IT structure, within my OT structure, within my rules and process rules and regulations, where I've actually reduced technical debt. Every time I've walked in, done an analysis, and looked at something, technical debt's increased, because now you've opened Pandora's box. Now you see more, and you realize that, oh my gosh, I thought there was 20 things that had to be documented, but those 20 things have 40 things behind them. So now I've got 60 things to document. My technical debt is now triple what it was. So I don't see where that's going to help. Improve data usage with inbuilt analytics, cutting data management efforts by up to 70%. That was one of the things that was in one of the reports that I looked at, and I'm thinking, I don't know where they could come up with that 70%. That's totally unprovable. Just don't see it happening. And really, data fabric is It may be number one in our hearts, but it's number two as far as the buzzword bingo award goes. So, as you can guess from data fabrics, I don't think it's going to be here. I don't think this is going to catch on. I think people who try it are going to be profoundly disappointed with the lack of results and with the fact that it just makes things worse and not things better until you put something in place that will stop the idea of data silos. And I don't know how we're going to do that. Graph technologies. So here's one of the things that I can use graph technologies outside of a data fabric. I don't need the data fabric to use graph technologies. Since you are doing data analytics, you can do this based on graph theory. And when you think about graph theory, again, you go back to it was a little bit before the 1970s. It was actually in 1736, which the first public Leonhard Euler of Euler numbers was the one who derived it. Published in what's called the Seven Bridges of Königsberg. And what that was the paper, this is 1736, Königsberg, Königsberg, which was in Germany at the time, and I think now is either back in Poland or Russia. The town has got a number of canals going through it. There's 7 bridges that connect all the areas of Königsberg together. How can you prove mathematically that I can walk across all 7 of them without going back across any of the bridges to get to another bridge? I can only cross them one time. And so he built the math that really showed that it couldn't be done, which was really more important in the long run than showing that it could be done. Because what you want to be able to do very early on is prove that. You want to prove that negative, that can't be done. It really determines correctness, relationship amongst different data sets, things for social media analysis. I can look at the identification of influences communities on social media networks. You think about people who are famous for being famous. Paris Hilton, how many followers does she have? If you care, do you want to look at maybe, since she's pushing NFTs and you're interested in NFTs, maybe you want to analyze all her followers and the chain back from those with NFTs, and you can start looking at how much influencing did she really do. And actually, I think that study's probably been done. I have not read it, and I'm probably not going to. I can evaluate different paths, spreads behavior through different communities. When I look at what's the next thing that's going to occur in Austin, Texas, in the real estate industry. And I can go back and look at data. I've got data back to the mid 1800s. I can look at all of this data, put all this data together, and then say, what are the paths? What are the paths through the data? What's happened? I think it's going to take a few years. I think that maybe 3. I doubt if it's going to take as long as 6. But I think it's going to be integrating components of existing data platforms. If you've got in Oracle, you're going to see this in Oracle. There's no doubt about it. It'll be there. You'll also be developing some of these in-house. And again, all you need is this is a good place to bring in an intern who's working on their PhD in math from one of your local universities. Bring an intern in to do this. This is a great job for them. So it's probably going to be integrated through specialist vendors. There's a lot of vendors out there today who specialize in data extraction tools. So if I'm going to use data extraction tools, this graph technology is a great way to add that on to my repertoire of tools. So I think you'll see more of this by specific vendors. I see it right now in the oil and gas industry, where there's some of the vendors there who are focusing and talking about we can do graph technology as part of our data analytics. So it's starting to be there, and it's really starting to take hold. So I think you'll see more of the graph technologies. Whoop, wrong one. There we go. Graph technologies. So I think this is a positive. You're going to see more of this. And I think it's something, if you've got a lot of data and you're concerned with trending, this is the next step in trending. This is going to go back and look at your entire data set. So I think this is an important, really an important one to use. Distributed enterprise. So we had smart everything, which gave a thumbs down to, but now we've got the distributed enterprise, which is, I can say thanks again to COVID. Um, the quarantine really proved that going into the office in many cases is not required, unless you have to have direct one-on-one with the public. Unless you're in retail, you're in sales, you're selling cars, you're selling airplanes, something like very high end. You're selling homes. You're going to have to be one-on-one. But if you're like many of us who are analysts, who work in IT or OT, many times what we work on is somewhere else anyway. The majority of the time when I'm working on something, it's on a system that's somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the world. So I don't have to be in an office. All I need to have is a good wireless encryption or a good wireless connection and good encryption on my laptop, which I do. So we don't have to go into the office. The impact on this is that there have been a lot of technology service changes so that employees can basically have a work experience that doesn't have a lot of baggage and overhead attached to it. We're using a WebEx right now. People have been using WebEx throughout this whole pandemic. I'm especially partial to Zoom. I use Zoom all the time. Majority of the other people in my company like to use Teams. So I've got, of course, we've got Teams, so we use Teams. It's just become much easier. I think also there's a hybrid. We do a number of hybrid where several of us will be in the office and we'll be connecting to other of our folks or with our clients elsewhere in the world. And we'll set it up where we can do that very easily and have lots of projectors and see lots of what we need to see of each other. So it becomes much easier to do that. Plus, it cut down, and we obviously had to cut down because of the travel restrictions. But airline travel, if you've done any internationally lately, is still slogging through the mud, whatever class you're in, and it's still not fun. So it's going to be another several years, I think, before flying is going to be fun. So we'll see more of this. Also, the delivery models. We've changed a lot of the delivery models so that we emphasize distributed services. We have different ways to now distribute the reports we do, different ways to have the critical meetings we're responsible for. And we've done that, and it's become easy to do that. Many times we're going to see that virtual reality and enhanced reality are going to have to be embraced in this distributed enterprise. I talk more about that in the metaverse, but I think we all know what virtual reality is, what enhanced reality is. And I think we're going to be seeing that this is going to be an important tool set. And especially in our case, where we're looking at working with lots of heavy equipment, equipment that's out on rigs. What we want to be able to do is you still need a person out on the rig. You still need people out there running equipment. It's not going to be completely automatic. That's never going to happen in something like oil and gas or any type of exploration or extractive industries. You just can't do it with not even with robots and drones. So you have to have people there, but you want to cut down the number of people. So what we're investigating now and we're looking at is basically the one person on board who's got the cameras, who's got everything set up, who is looking at a blowout protector, is looking at a driller's control system, control cabin, and they're now able to bring in other people virtually. And so I may have an engineer standing on the deck of a semi-submersible in the Caspian Sea, and virtual reality, I can be standing right next to him talking to him. And that is going to be incredibly valuable. It's probably where I can see some of the first real values, unless you're a gamer, for virtual reality. Gartner's looked at it that by next year, 75% of organizations that exploit distributed enterprise benefits, they'll have an enterprise growth about 25% faster than competitors. So that's going to be incredible because, again, just in February, the total non-farm payroll employment in the U.S. rose by 678,000 jobs. Many of those jobs are part of distributed enterprises, and that's going to be really critical. Unemployment rate's down to 3.8%. So with that's happening, we're fairly rapidly recovering from the disaster that COVID was, and we're going to see that it's going to take more distributed enterprises to do that. And of course, I think distributed enterprises get a big thumbs up. So after this, the metaverse. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about the metaverse. Michael Maludis, who's also with CAI, he and I had about an hour and a half long conversation 2 weeks ago on the metaverse. And I think the key there is that where it came from. It came from the novel Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. And if you're a science fiction buff, you may have read it. If you're not a science fiction buff, it's worth taking a look at if you're a technologist, because it really was where the metaverse term was coined. And I think that when I look at the metaverse and you got to compare it to universe, it really isn't that kind of portmanteau word. When I look at metaverse as it is today, we talk about all kinds of verses, but the metaverse, meta basically means me. And I look at the metaverse as being incredibly self-referential because it's what you're going to do. It sets up where you are. I believe the metaverse is here today, and it doesn't require virtual headsets, although it would be good. For IT, I think you're going to be finding that once the first VP of sales and marketing walks in with their $300 virtual reality headset that ties to an application on their iPhone or their iPad or their Android or their laptop, all of a sudden it's going to be lots of other people are going to want them. And all of you in IT are going to have a great time trying to put all those together and make that work. I think there's areas where it can work. It's not that hard to put it together. In fact, it's fairly easy and fairly straightforward. But the key is going to be, the real killer here is going to be security. If you think about these virtual reality headsets and what they're doing, they're looking at your eyes. So many times they're taking your blood pressure. They're looking at your heart rate because you're playing games, and they want to know, did this monster make you jump more than the other monster? Because they want that feedback. Well, this is an enormous amount of personal data that I certainly don't want out in the wild, and I think we have to be very careful of that. I would recommend, and it's on YouTube, so if you've got a YouTube account, you can go grab it and watch it. I'd recommend you take a look at that. The metaverse discussion. Just listen to it, and it's a pretty good discussion. Michael's got some great questions. I've got some crazy prophecies, of course, in there, and I think it's everything you want to know about the metaverse, and would give you the ability when someone brings it up, you'll be able to talk about it from a point of view that is more realistic than what we see today in the metaverse. Of course, it's thumbs up. I think we're in the metaverse today, and and it doesn't take Web 3.0, it doesn't take blockchain, it doesn't take NFTs, it doesn't take any of that. All it takes is the ability to have an area where you can walk into it and you become part of that society. So think of games that you get immersed in. There's an important issue in that with the immersion of games. That's really where the metaverse is starting out now, and the idea of also virtual real estate. Um, there's a lot of work being done where I want to be able to buy this section. I want my metaverse, and there's not one metaverse, everyone can have their own. I want my metaverse right in here, and I want it near the metaverse for Gucci because I'm going to sell knockoffs and I want to be able to have them walk past Gucci and come to my place and see that it's less expensive. Whatever. Those are some of the things that are being done today. And there's actually law firms that specialize now in virtual real estate. So metaverse is here. Metaverse is here to stay. Privacy enhancing computation. We're all affected by this. This is one of those things that we want to thank Facebook for having this. This was not due to the U.S. All the U.S. hearings that you saw Mr. Zuckerberg at his finest. It was the ones done in the European Union. The EU came after Facebook pretty rapidly because they're concerned about data protection, privacy, and the legislation there to basically the right to be forgotten. I want to be able to, if I've got an account on Facebook and I decide I'm tired of it, I don't like Facebook, I don't like Mark Zuckerberg, I think his hoodies are stupid, I just want to get off Facebook. Well, unless you've got some data protection, your data is still there. What this does for you, and especially in Europe right now, Europe and California, not anywhere else right now in the world, you have the right to be forgotten. So I can get on my account and say, forget about me. Any trace of me needs to be gone right now. Anything I wrote, anything I commented on, I've got to be gone like I was never on there. So that's important. Where does this impact you? It applies to you if if you're operating in California, if you're operating in Europe. It applies to us. We've just gone through this and revamped our full data policies, our data protection policies. We basically protected it before, but where it really impacts us is as we're doing recruiting. So now we have to explain to people exactly what data we're keeping. Are we keeping a copy of your CV? Are we keeping a picture? They know everything that we're keeping for them. And this is an important aspect. I personally think it's a pain. It's a pain for my HR group and for IT, but I think it's the right thing to do. And we have to do it to operate in Europe. I think it helps. It helps trust. You can prevent, once you've gone in and really gone through the process of understanding the data model for all this data, who's got it, talk about data silos, talk to your recruiting people. Whoever recruits in your organization, I bet, has a lot of data stuck out on Dropbox somewhere. Well, this solidifies that, and that really prevents a lot of privacy incidents because you know where everything is. Privacy enhancing computation, it's going to protect personal, sensitive information. Hopefully you can securely share, pool, and analyze the data without compromising confidentiality or privacy. You get to say what other people can see of your data. There's a lot of places where it's in trusted execution environments where you know the data is trusted, it's been checked, it's been cleaned, it's been set up. GDPR is a general data protection regulation. That's the European one, and that's the most the most comprehensive one right now, and that's the one we end up complying with. So there's a number of those going on. Also, there's a Digital Markets Act coming online that is going to be even more have more protections in it for buying online and putting digital markets in place so that are you going to use Bitcoin? Are you going to use cryptocurrency? What kind of currency are you going to use? This is all going to be laid out in the Digital Markets Act. So this is going to be an area where it's going to have an enormous amount of impact. And again, it's all due to the way Facebook operated and the devil may care attitude with people's data. So privacy enhancing computation, big thumbs up. You're going to see more and more of this, and you're going to see more and more of it within the U.S. It's going to end up that California won't be the only one. You'll see other states adopting it, and my bet is that it's probably the next two are going to be New York and Massachusetts. Decision intelligence. So I'm sure we've all worked with Boston Squares. You put this quadrant together, You decide what the x-axis is, the y-axis is, and then you drop things in based on their magnitude. That's basically what decision intelligence is. Significant could be a significant source of competitive advantage. It's really how decisions get made, how outcomes are evaluated, how you can improve them by feedback, and so on. But it's basically Boston squares on steroids. I think that most of us do these. I use them all the time for analysis. I've been using them for decades. They work just great, and they're a nice graphic tool. And plus, you can do them on PowerPoint without any trouble at all. They're really fast and easy to do on PowerPoint, and that gives you the fat circles with the different size circles for your data, so you can see the magnitude of the data, not only its position on the matrix. Again, I think decision intelligence is is a great idea. So, and I think this is one of those things that we're going to be using more and more of, and hopefully we'll be seeing them more in the analysis that we all do. Big thumbs up. Hyperautomation. This is buzzword bingo. I'm sure many of you have heard about hyperautomation or what it is. My picture here is my favorite picture of a server cabinet with all the data routing in it. Hyperautomation looks to identify, analyze, and automate as many processes as possible. Now, if you think about the processes in your organization or organizations you've worked with, I think that phrase in and of itself sends chills through me. There's so many things that shouldn't be automated, and when you start automating as many things as possible, I think you're going to have a horrendous approach to it. It looks at three key priorities. What it's trying to do is improve the quality of work. So, not the quantity, but the quality. So first, hopefully you may be ISO certified. We're ISO certified. ISO 9001 2015. So we've got a quality management system. And we look at continuous improvement in the quality of work. And that's a whole set of processes by itself. That's not just something you say we're going to do. It's to hopefully speed up business processes and enhance the agility of decision making. I think those three things, just doing one of those is more than enough. Putting all the three things together is crazy. They talk about end-to-end automation, and you accomplish end-to-end automation by I harness the power of multiple technologies. That sounds so much like Elmer Gantry preaching on a Sunday morning. End-to-end automation accomplished by harnessing the power of multiple technologies. And that is just an amazing sentence. I don't know who put it together, but I applaud them for their ability to complicate and obfuscate at the same time. Supposed to marry AI tools to robotic process automation, yet another three-letter acronym. Robotic process automation is there to treat my applications as robots. So I put them in place and do them. Apple had something like that in the original Macintosh, a way to tie processes together. Utilizes mobile automation tools to hyper automate. And it's our first prize winner in this presentation's buzzword bingo. So this is number one. This is the best I've read in at least 2 or 3 years on buzzword bingo. And as you can imagine, it's thumbs down. I don't think we're going to see hyperautomation. Now, quantum computing. One of the things, and quantum computing, I'm going to be talking about this in a whole session. So I just want to talk basically about, with quantum computing, when we talk about it, why you want to care about it? You want to care about it because it's coming, and we're going to see real quantum computers within the next 18 months. How it affects your business, depending on what you do, it may put you out of business. Also, you may need it for your business, and you may need to rent time on them somewhere. These are a completely new process. What's different about it is it's the non-von Neumann structure. It doesn't have ones and zeros. It looks at a quanta, which is a piece of data, and it looks at it across a continuum as to where it is. So think of any of you who took physics or read about this is Schrodinger's cat. When Is the cat dead or alive? When I open the box, do I kill it or does it jump out? This is the, I don't know whether it's dead or alive within, it's not a 1 or a 0. So it's going to be different. It's going to take a whole session to talk about it. It's being used today in a number of areas. It's being used in semiconductor design, and not the quantum computers themselves, because we're still building them. But we've got the algorithms. And so all the algorithms are built to do this. We can do quantum computing on regular computers. It's just not at the speed that it'll be at when we have it. Timeline, we're going to see them within a year, and they're going to be there because we're developing the silicon we're developing the hardware right now. And then you got to consider, how do you put it in your roadmap? So quantum computing, what's it really? Why do you care? It's going to be on April 27th. So sorry for advertising another one of mine, but I think you want to, if you're interested in quantum computing, and I think you should be, you want to sit in on this because it's going to be real enlightening. Of course, quantum computing gets an enormous thumbs up. So here were the 10 technologies to watch that we looked at. So cross out smart spaces, cross out data fabric, cross out hyperautomation. They're not going to last. Generative AI is going to be out there. It's going to be some type of machine learning, and it may be some type of autonomous machine learning, but it'll morph. Graph technologies, I think you're going to be incorporating those. And if you use Oracle, you may have it there and you don't know it yet. Distributed enterprise, I think you've already done that thanks to COVID. Now you just need to make sure it gets formalized. The Metaverse, it's here today. Privacy enhanced computation, you're going to have to make sure that becomes part of your cybersecurity, because it's going to be important to implement it. Decision intelligence with Boston Squares, and quantum computing. I think these are all going to be part and parcel of what you want to do. So just in conclusion, I think what we want to look is, where do you look for these guys? I use Gartner, McKinsey, InfraGard, which is an FBI group that we're founders. We're part of one of the founding companies of it, and it's FBI working with business, and we get a lot of information on different technologies, especially cybersecurity. Just Google searches. I think you want to filter them. What's the immediacy of your need, acceptability of risk, what are your technical staff abilities, and how do you budget for them? And then you need to build your technology roadmap. So I think these are the things that you want to be able to do, and look at these technologies as to how they may fit in to a technology roadmap that you put together. Thank you very much.
Don, as always, thank you so much for presenting with us today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks to all the participants, and hope to see you again.